So tonight's teacher, Ani Shahinian, she is a doctoral candidate in history and theology at the University of Oxford. Ms. Shahinian holds an MA in Near Eastern and Languages and Cultures, Near Eastern Languages and Cultures, Armenian History and Literature from UCLA, and graduate certificates in philosophy and theology from the University of Oxford. She received her BA in philosophy, ethics, and professional writing from the University of California, Santa Barbara. Her doctoral research addresses the question of Christian martyrdom in the context of political, economic, and ecclesiastical history in the late medieval Armenia. So Ani, I want to welcome you, and you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Eric. Very good to see familiar faces and new faces as well. Thank you for welcoming me. I want to first thank the Eastern Diocese and also my colleague and friend, Jesse Arlen, who invited me to join this series, and also for Eric hosting this. Thank you, Eric. I would like to start and share my screen. A PowerPoint presentation I prepared for us to follow, which would, I think, make it easier. All right, can everyone see the manuscript cover screen with the title page? Excellent. Okay, so today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about Sarkis Shnorhali and his exegesis on 1 Peter 3:15. It is a grand task given I've spent roughly almost 2 decades studying the verse 1 Peter 3:13 to 17. It's a very important call to every Christian. I think Sarkis Shnorhali helps us significantly and leaves us with a handful of questions we can walk away. And as my colleague Julia last week summed up her teaching on the classical Armenian through the teachings of Ephraim, Saint Ephraim, that hope is an action. And I think today, as we walk away with a handful of questions, I think it will put us in a position for further action in how we work on and see and view the whole hope, Christ as our hope. And I think Professor and Dr. Roberta Urban's talk last week, if you were able to join, if you weren't, I highly recommend for you to watch the recording. It really touched on some very important definitions and understandings of hope, especially in the Armenian Christian tradition. So I really very much appreciated that. So this sort of adds to all of that. And also, I'm looking forward to reading some of Sarkis Shnorhali's commentary in classical Armenian and work through it with you. So Sarkis Shnorhali, a 12th century Vartapet. Shnorhali is a very distinguished title that was really bestowed on only 3 Vartapets in Armenia's history. The most famous one everyone knows is Nerses Shnorhali. If you do a Shnorhali search on Google, probably the first 15 pages on Google will be Nerses Shnorhali. But there are others. Sarkis Shnorhali is who I will focus on today. The title signifies particularly the Vartapets who studied at Galmidvank. This is the Red Monastery in Kesun. So this is the Kesun Red Monastery in Cilicia. This was established sometime very early in the 12th century, I want to say 1205, right around the time when Grigor Bagayasev II, who was the son of Magistros, Grigor Magistros, he died and was buried there. So this is a very important site. This is also the time period around 1105, 1106, when the whole Catholicosate of the Armenian Church moves from the glorious city of Ani. I'm a huge fan of the city, famously known of 1,001 churches, the Catholicos moves from the city of Ani to Cilicia. And this region, the Red Monastery, becomes a predominant center for Armenian spiritual and scriptural life and production. I'm going to close my window just 1 second. Sorry about that. So it's very important context, and I want to introduce it in the fullness of this to bring it to our attention about what it is that we're going to look into in the fuller context of where Saki Shahinian came from. Not much is known about his biography. A few colophons that we have, he left at the end of the copying and actually writing the exegesis. This one I very much like, coming from 1156. It's a colophon that actually is added towards the end of his exegesis on the Catholic epistles. There are 7 epistles. At the end of this commentary, he says something along the lines of, and of course this was probably in the works of in the early 1150s, where he observed and saw how the Petrine epistles and sort of the Catholic epistles meet collectively with James and First John, Second John, were less transmitted, so to speak, in exegesis compared to the others. And this was very interesting for me when I read this in the colophon, because I felt the same thing in terms of the Pauline epistles. We have so much emphasis on, especially here in our Western culture. But what about the Catholic epistles? And Saki Shahinian had a very similar experience and an awakening, if you want to say. He came to this recognition and wanted to, and had this burning desire, I think it's described in the colophon, to commentate on these books and on these letters, I should say, epistles. And he found them to be the epistles of works and actions, very important to accommodate and also come along with our faith. So one more historical introduction is the name Stepanos Manuk Vartapet, who was the teacher and the guider and sort of the leader, the Rabbonapet of the monastery. I can't say much more at the moment in terms of time and also focus, but I thought I mentioned some of the names and places that perhaps if you're interested, you can explore a bit more in your free time or interest, or even in Q&A. I'm happy to explore a bit more. So this is the 1743 publication in Constantinople of the commentary of the 7 epistles by Saki Shahinian. As you can see on my left here, it's the cover page of the epistle. I've cut and pasted here the very section, 2.5 paragraphs of it, of what we would read from Saki Shahinian today. And because if it's a bit blurry and also of all the abbreviations, I will provide the text for us to follow in print, which I've typed it out for us. But I just thought I'd show this to you because I thought it was very nice to see something that has come down to us from the 18th century. But also what's very important about Saki Shahinian, he did not just stay in the 12th century Cilicia. What's important about him, especially for my work, I work mostly in the Lake Van region, the southeastern shores of Lake Van. The Vartapets in the Lake Van region copied Saki Shahinian's works over and over again, essentially all throughout the 1400s. We have various copies of his commentaries, which speaks to the importance of how it spoke to the people of that time, and quite interestingly still speaks today. So that's what I will say about sort of the history. But before going into the epistle itself, I thought it would be very nice and helpful for us to read the scripture together and see what it is really that Saki Shahinian was commentating on. I have the Krapad, but first perhaps I propose that we read in the English and then we can return to the Karapaj. So 1 Peter 3, 13 through 17. The context, I would say, is just a bit wider in the chapter, but I'm focusing on this pericope. And again, during question and answer, I would be open to more specifics, but here I will try to focus on speaking about hope. So 1 Peter 3, 13 through 17 says, "Who is there to harm you if you prove zealous for what is good? But even if you should suffer for the sake of righteousness, you are blessed. And do not fear their intimidation, and do not be troubled, but sanctify Christ as Lord in your hearts, always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you, yet with gentleness and reverence, and keep a good conscience, so that in the things in which you are slandered, those who rival your good behavior in Christ will be put to shame. For it is better, if God should will it so, that you suffer for doing what is right, rather than doing for what is wrong." I've highlighted a handful of terms here. Zealous, nachan zavork. And then fear and intimidation, so essentially, do not fear and be intimidated, nor be troubled. These are terms I would highly recommend sort of almost memorizing. I sense it's very important terms we see repetitively. And then also good conscience. This, I think, is a very important understanding, I think, in the Christian mind, but the Armenian text, unlike any other translations of scripture, uses this word baris kachtunus. And this is very interesting how it really reflected in the Armenian life and example, as well as to what it meant as a witness. It's not only about the mind, but it's also the way of life, because baris kachtunus, it speaks to the sweet way of life, which expounds further in the idea of living your life with gentleness and reverence. So these are a few terms I've highlighted in the verse for both Karapad, but also perhaps something to meditate on. But we will focus on what I have in the verse in bold: always being ready to make a defense to everyone who asks you to give an account for the hope that is in you. It's interesting, if I were to ask you, what do you think that hope is? What do you think, if you were to read this verse, you're reading it throughout the epistle, and you come here and you say the account for the hope that is in you, what is it that you're going to give a defense of to your friend, colleague, or whoever who may be asking? I'm just curious if there are any ideas, thoughts. Feel free to unmute yourself and tell me, what is that hope?
That Christ is the way, the truth, and the life.
Okay, very good. Anyone else would like to say what that hope you would define as before we look at Shnorhali, Saki Shnorhali's definition of what he is providing to be that hope?
Everlasting life.
Everlasting life. Okay. Very good. It's a very rich verse that often, when not understood in its context, I think it could be difficult to really understand what it is that you're giving a defense of. Are you giving a defense of, Christ's resurrection, the reality of his miracles and his life? What is it, right? What is this hope? And I think Saki Shnorhali helps us with this. And I would like to let's see here, visit what he says, what hope is for him. And I think it's rich enough that it could sort of engage us in a conversation thereafter. So I've translated on the right. On the left, it's the classical Armenian. And because this is a classical Armenian module course, I think if it's okay, we can read it slowly and then go into the translation together. So here Sakis Nurhali says, particularly on the verse 15, as I'm focusing on, as opposed to the verses earlier. It says, huis tviins asel as Christos martiritian ըստնօրենություն, որ արդարև եղև հույս, ակնկալության հուսահատելոցն իկենաց անտի աստծո, որ Say that again.
Որ հուսացույց ըզմեզ ծրի բարգևոք յուրովք որդիս աստծո լինել եւ ժառանգավորս երգնից արքայության.
Beautiful. Thank you, Baron Foden. That's very nice. So just to break it down, who is Tavi'in's asel? How would you go about that? I know the translation is next to it, but how would you go about translating that? Or if you want to read the translation, that's absolutely fine. Yes.
The asel there, I mean, you have it as one should say.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I mean, hope seems to me, huis ins tviins, I mean, that's simple enough.
Mm-hmm.
Hope seems to me, yeah, to say, obviously, because it's the infinitive, but I don't know. It's sort of awkward in English.
It is, isn't it? I have it in brackets just to sort of play with and see what makes better sense in English. So I'm very much open to various translations to see what the English, the end result in the English would be. So I say one should say, or to say, in the literal sense, asel would be is the infinitive of asem, right? So right. To say, right?
So is it along the lines of that is to say?
Okay, I like that. I like that. That's very nice.
Or even a looser translation, you wouldn't even use the asel. In other words, hope, it seems to me, is.
Exactly.
In other words, yeah, you'd leave it out altogether in English.
Although I have no problem with the infinitive and the anthropomorphizing of hope by that it speaks to me. Why can't it say?
Mm-hmm. Yes, those are all very, very good comments. And especially when you go into literal translations, it's a bit tricky in the English. So I would say very much you could eliminate the asel entirely. You still keep the meaning. And I really like what Mark was also proposing. I think it was Mark, correct me, or was it Avi that said, is to say that is to say. I think that also works in the English. So hope, it seems to me, is and here's also another one I thought it would be interesting to see what you all think. Ըստնօրենություն. So this is it's an accusative. Ըստնօրենություն. So what are we trying? I mean, I say economia, which comes from, we take this from the Greek. Providence, in the literal translation of tanoren, to be providential. So then tanorenություն as Christos martiritian, and this is the Christ's incarnation. And there is the context of this is actually quite interesting, and I will get that. I will get to that at the very end.
But sorry, Ani, if denorenություն is the object of a verb, is that correct? Where's the verb?
Yeah, yes. So it seems to me, so asel is the infinitive, that is to
Right.
say, right? We leave that. So is our sort of verb. in
Oh,
this
okay.
case. Does that make sense?
I guess.
That is to say, it is. So sometimes often I find that when I'm translating, I have to insert my is when it's actually not there to make sense of that. And I wonder if that's just based on the period or the way the Vartapet is composing it at the time. But yes, here I think the main verb is
I got to say, I don't even understand the English at this point, but
okay, so hope, it seems to me, is the economia or the providence of Christ's incarnation, who truly became all our anticipation or expectation of hope for us who were without hope of the life of God. So there, so I will stop there because the next takes on to another is another point.
did you mean exception or expectation?
Expectation.
Yeah,
Oh,
you have exception.
sorry, I'm typing. Oh, yes, thank you for catching that. Expectation. That's the anengalution.
Right.
Are you? Yeah, anengalution. So that could be anticipation as well, because you're sort of in that expectation or anticipation state. I also like attention because it's something that you are becoming fully in the state of awareness. What do you all make of husahatelutsens?
We who have lost hope.
Mhm.
Yeah. Could you say we who, well, would despair be the wrong word there? I mean,
No,
No, despair,
those of us who have despaired.
right. Yeah.
without hope, in despair. That's good, thank you. And what would you make of the Igianus anti astazo? What do you think anti is doing there?
Is the part of dal or something like that?
Is there a reason it's not Astudzo? Is that just a typo, or is that kind of like where Eastern Armenian loses some of the vowels in the middle, like Astudzu?
Oh, it's a typo, and
Okay.
I'm taking it from the abbreviation, so I typed it all
Ah.
out. So I missed the letter
Okay.
again.
Nothing.
You
Sorry.
notice typos, I would be not offended at all if you pointed out, because it is important.
So on D mean on this side?
Yes, excellent. Yes. Here.
So
That's
is
right.
the life, our life here? God.
Yes. Yeah.
Ani, I also looked it up in Bedrosian, and he's saying that Andi could mean the world to come or the blessings of the world to come. So it has a very specific meaning, it seems.
This is Petrosian.
Norbarkirk.
Norbarkirk, yes. Sometimes that he could have specific sort of, technical translations that may not always apply, especially I would say perhaps my at least my experience has been when I'm looking at scripture, it hasn't been too precise. But yes, that's fine as well. Here I've sort of left it to be here, that I mean, in the sense that here in the life of God.
So, I mean, if I looked at it to make sense of what they're saying, what he's saying, it seems like it would be for those of us who have lost hope in God in this life. Lost, I don't know, I mean, maybe I'm just probably wrong, but I mean, it seems like
it is without hope,
right,
having lost or been without hope.
but yeah, no, what I meant was, but being without hope of the life of God, I'm not even sure what that means in English. Whereas we are without hope, we have despaired of God in this life. I mean, maybe I'm just imposing that, making it up, but that just sounds like what it would be to me. What do I know?
No, Mark, I think that's where the anti becomes important, and I thought of highlighting, because it's otherwise becomes confusing in terms of the here, there, and now sort of translation. Okay, so then moving on to the second part, vor husatsuit zmez dzri parkevuk yurovk vortis astetsolini yev jarangavoris yerknits arkayusyanen. And that's essentially, I think, what is answering to the hope that that applies to the life of God, or in the life of God, let me say. That is, who gave us hope with his free gifts to become children of God, thereby heirs of the kingdom. Any particular, I guess, questions about the language?
Is there just one question on Yergnits? Obviously, it's plural because it's Yergink, but was Yergink plural in Karapar, or is it, in other words, there's all kinds of things that were plural and we now use them as singular, even though they have the ke at the end. In other words, yeah, the kingdom of heaven, first of all, is what it should be, right? Heirs of the kingdom of heaven. Yergnits arkayutyan.
Yes, kingdom of heaven, yes. Oops.
My point is, heavens was always plural. It wasn't like there was no singular form, like, I don't know.
That's correct, as far as I know.
Okay.
It's like, there's a few of those words that are like that, like park is always plural as well. There's a bunch of other ones that are, we render them singularly, but they're technically, mine, medic is also always usually plural, isn't it?
Yeah, but in Karapar you have mead sometimes.
But that's accusative, you have meats.
Oh, I see. Okay. Sorry.
I have a question about the tsari part. Vor husatsuit zmez tsari parkevok. That just strikes me as unusual. I mean, there is no free lunch. So this idea of all of this being free, is that common? Is is that consistent with the overall sort of view of this gift, which implies being free? If it's a gift, so
yes, that's definitely more than a sort of a language level question, right? We see this also in various other parts. I don't, in the Psalms and also in the prophets, we have this as well, to come and receive it freely. Or I think here it's an invitation that it is given to us, and it's not tzadi in the sense that free as we would here, of course, that's the limit of the translation to say, come receive it freely. It's a free gift. It's in the sense that perhaps, if I can say just with my limited comment, it's speaking more about that which we do, as opposed to that which is done, received without any sort of active doing. He is sort of handing it to us. We didn't do anything to receive the Son of God in his fullness. So he, in his own will, has come and done that. So I think the wholeness of that hope begins in the incarnation for Sarkishno Hadi here, but it does not end there. It takes it all the way. If we look at the fullness of the Christian narrative, it's not just only in his incarnation. He starts there, and then it goes all the way to his resurrection and life thereafter, which he also promises to us, which is then, it's important here to look at the fullness of all the other verses that could come together. I thought of a few, and I listed them here, but what it means to be entering into that kingdom, into being children and heirs of his heavenly kingdom. Then sort of it all comes together, what the term tzadi really would mean. He does not commentate on the word tzadi alone. That would have been interesting to get his sort of, straight response. He gives quite a bit of other commentaries on the various other words, so that he comments on the word, logos, that is banin, which we read in the verse before, but we don't have that for tzadi. And this is just my understanding. And of course, Kevork, if you have other thoughts on that, I would be very happy to hear, and it would enrich my understanding there as well. But I think it's sort of that fullness, this is where that economia, or the fullness of the Norenitsun comes together, in the sense that it is given to us.
I understood the city to mean kind of what it means. In other words, we didn't slaughter a heifer to deserve this. We didn't do anything in particular. It was given to us. It was, it was like grace. It's given to us. Mm-hmm. Yeah, freely given, exactly.
And so is this hope, in that sense of, like I said, from beginning with the carnation, but all the way through everything else that he promises in the life of God. So I've mentioned a few verses here. Perhaps you may find it interesting for reading them within the larger context of what it means to be heirs and children of God. And I thought it's very encouraging to see hope, Christ as hope, being the theme of our study, to see that Sarkishno Hadi is very much bringing this together in his commentary to say, we can start at this incarnation of Christ. And as we will see in a moment, he actively raises all the possible questions that brings together that which we must be prepared for to answer, to know that hope is active and alive, not only in us, but in the ability to communicate. So why don't I look at his second paragraph on commentating on hope. So again, this is going to leave with more questions, which then allows us to walk away and think a little bit more. Maybe because I do like a little bit more interaction and interactive reading, maybe I can ask Matthew if you would like to read maybe the first set of questions, and then someone else can read the other set if you feel comfortable. If not, I'm happy to do it.
In Armenian, you're saying?
Yes, that would be nice.
Oh, geez.
You want me to read?
I'll try a few words.
That's great. Yes.
Art yeta kundrin
Tirn sucks.
contiers socks husuin zero ase yeta ziard astuzo. There's another typo. Mart Yegev, it's hard, it's very small, it's hard to read. Yevgam Vorbes Panan Marmin. That's it's very hard to, it's very small.
Honey, can you make it full screen? Is that possible on your computer?
I'm seeing it full screen. Is it
okay?
Is it not full screen where you how you're seeing?
No.
It?
Maybe like the next slide and the slides below.
Yeah, we're seeing all the other stuff.
Oh, okay. Let's see how it.
If you played the presentation, if you hit play, then it'll open it up. I think right now you have it in presenter mode, which you may need because of the notes that you have in your slide. I don't know.
Is that better?
There you go.
Much better.
Excellent. I wish you mentioned that earlier. I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that. I was seeing it on my other screen, quite large, so I thought I'm actually in the large screen. But now this is much better for me as well.
I can read that.
Oh, I changed. There we go. So ardiyete khantren sakis huisen zero e astayete ziart astezo mart yerev yev kam vorbes ban marmin. So now, if this is an issue concerning or on the account of your hope, then the question is, how did God become human? Ziart astezo mart yerev yev kam vorbes banen martu, and how did the word become flesh? So if this hope that is in us raises all these questions about if he is the incarnation and the hope, how all these questions arise, then how did he become human? How did he become flesh? And so on and so, and then there are a few other questions which, if no one objects, I can read and we can look at the translations.
Ani, sorry, I had a language question first. What is how is ziart different from vorbes?
So ziart is the question. So vorbes, are you seeing it as question? Yes, you are. Okay.
Yes, it is.
You're asking the question of vorbes and ziart.
In other words, how and how it seems to be, or is
why? Ziart.
Oh, ziart is why?
Ziart. Ziart is why. Did I have it how?
You have then how did God become human?
And vorbes, I would probably, sort of working through the translation out loud with you, I would probably go with how or in what way.
Okay. But I mean, they're synonymous in some sense here, right? They're being used. How did God become man? Ziart astuzo mart yerev yev gam vorbes panan marmin. And how did the word become flesh?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
In other words, obviously they're not the same. You're using them the same here, and it makes sense that they're both how in English, but there's got to be some reason there's a different.
Right. So
the next sentence does the same thing.
In the classical, I would say perhaps for the vorbes, how or in what way, and then ziart closer to why, in what way, perhaps. Oh, I have.
I mean, in both, the next sentence has Ziart and then Vorbes as well.
Mhm.
And so does the next one. So
Mhm.
is that more like, and even the next one too, so is that more like a, in other words, sort of a formula, sort of, you see what I mean?
Sort of
A
repetition.
repetition,
or-
exactly, kind of. That.
Yeah, I actually didn't think too much about the difference there, but in the literal sense of it, I would translate it as either how in the or in what way. Does that
Right.
I wonder
Yeah.
if Esdras would have a different idea about that.
Yeah, I think, just as in English, we have the two phrases, how and in what way. I think these are, that's exactly the nuance here.
Okay.
I wonder if you could say that one is more sort of original to Vorbes as Ziart, but I'm sorry, I can't say that I know that for sure. Going based off, I would say by definition, either one would work.
And my point was, it's almost like it's a, I mean, like a, like almost a poetic repetition, starting it's a sentence, every sentence there has two questions in it. The first question starts with the Ziart, the second with a Vorbes. It's like, I mean, I don't know, maybe it's not, but it sounds almost like it's a kind of poetic form.
And I wonder, it is. And I wonder also if you were writing it, you repetitively over and over again, not to repeat the same. He kind of oscillates between the two. But I think in my translation here, if I were to sort of revisit, I would go between how and why, as opposed to consecutively doing the how.
Why is a totally different meaning. I mean, in other words, not what was the means, how was that possible, but
That's right,
what is the telos, what is the purpose?
I like the back and forth was in what way, then how, in what way, then how. That that makes the most sense to me, just as like a poetic manner. Just to distinguish them, because they're different words.
And it's always gam vorbes, so it's
right.
in other words, it's the second half of each sentence.
Exactly. And also I would be careful with the sort of the punctuation, because it's not always the case where we can follow the punctuation.
Right.
I'm following it per question.
But my point is, there are units, there are questions where he's got starts with the Ziart, then he says gam vorbes, and then it starts again with the Ziart, and then in a sense almost contrasts it, gam vorbes.
And I think that's, I use the word oscillating, but perhaps contrasting is another good way of sort of creating that. I don't know if that's a sufficient response there, but I think creating that contrast, there's a level of sophistication in his style.
Is there a reason you didn't have the gam in there? In other words, you have it as separate sentences, but I mean, I would read it as, then how did God become human, or how did the word become? And even if it were an and, it would still be, I mean, it's gam is or, but
that's right. Yeah, gam is or, yeah.
I mean, he's joining them regardless of the punctuation. He's clearly joining the Ziart question, or contrasting it, or something, pairing it with the gam vorbes clause after it.
And one of the things we don't see here, because you see it in a paragraph, is how was it written in lines? Was it like a ziyard each line, one line, and then another line starting with ziyard and another line starting with ziyard? Someone later put it into a paragraph?
I'm not sure about the manuscript, but you could see it in the print, ziyard here. It's not the beginning. And then vorpes as
this is the printed version too, for
print,
much more recent. So
yeah, so at least in the print version, it's not, and in the manuscript, unfortunately, I haven't seen it myself, so I can't say. But here you could see it's the print version also in its abbreviations. It doesn't really just make it so that there would be any particular reason why it's one or the other in terms of spaces or trying to yeah, I don't see anything in particular there. Oops.
in the first sentence, he left out the verb in that second part. In other words, assumed the verb.
That is, yeah. Which
in
is,
the gam vorbes.
Where are you looking at?
Ziart astvad mart yerev, yev gam vorbes panen marmin. In other words, the yerev he left out. So maybe that's kind of, you see what I mean?
Yeah, this is actually not a, this is a common practice.
Right.
It would be kind of memorialized, if I can say, with the boot, to say it's being repeated.
Sure.
So that you're not using the verb twice in that same line. So that's not, I would think that's not too strange, especially in print. Maybe in the manuscript it wasn't like that, but in print certainly. But even probably more so in manuscript, provided questions of spacing, not having enough space to, or preserving space, they would use a boot.
No, I get that. I understand that I understand the purpose of not listing the verb there again. It would be kind of weird, actually.
Yes.
I guess if you did, but my point is that the second clause in each of those questions, the gam vorbes, maybe the part of it is that the verb isn't there. At least that's the way it works in the first one, maybe not in the others.
Yeah, and the others, they do have verbs.
They do have the verbs. You're right. Sorry. Okay, well, so much for that.
So much for that, yeah.
But that could have been a describable thing too. Someone could have forgotten a verb or not, but in one of the.
I'm just going to jump in here for a sec. Just excuse me. I just want to make sure that all the content is covered. I just want to give a 7-minute warning as far as being, I want to be respectful to everyone's time, and because the discussion is getting very in depth, which is awesome. I really appreciate this. I just want to make sure everyone is respected as far as ending at 8.
Thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
So if there's no objections, I'll just read through the questions and then we'll move on to the second part. Ziart antesanelin tesavoretsav gam vorpes an shoshapelin shoshapetsav Ziart ancharcharelin charcharetsav marmanov gam vorpes an mahan merav. And it's interesting to see this marmanov. If I was to go into the manuscript, I would want to know if that's actually there. But also in the print, it's parenthetical. Yev I gentanutsianen voch voroshetsav. Ziart I mahun gyanken gam vorpes I gentanutsianen mah. And I find that the very last to be very, very nice. So perhaps for time reason, we can just go to the very last one. How is life in death, or how is death in life? Would anyone have any other ways of representing that, especially with the ini mahun genats? I have it in death. Would everyone agree with that, or have a different rendering?
Sure. how can there be in death life,
Mhm.
or in life death?
So then you would remove the verb is and make it to a to be.
How life and death. I mean, it's life is a nominative and then just no verb. How life and death. It's like an implied is, just
Mhm.
for poetic reasons. That's how I would read that.
Sure, yeah.
Very nice, very nice.
I mean, again, in English, you would put the verb in the first question and leave it out of the second one. You know, how is it that there is in death life and in life death?
And would you then create two questions or one, which I've created two questions here, but not necessarily two questions for Shnorhali?
No, I would make, it seems it's two questions, but it's the reverse. In other words, it's the same question backwards and forwards.
Yeah, they're tied together, definitely.
Yeah. Okay.
That's my point about the gam vorbes.
Yes, all along, which I
Yeah.
like. Very, very good observation. I like that. Okay, a bit more, and then I do want to be respectful of time. HSBC հարցվածը պատասխանք լերուկ տալ պատրաստի եւ ճշմարտությամբ sorry, I can't read today, ուսուցանել զի եւ ձերո հույսն առավելություն հաստատությամբ երևեցի եւ նոքավոր խնդրեն այսպիսի իմաստուտցիս ուսանել ձենջ տիրապես շահյալք ի բանից ձերոց գնացեն. So be ready or attentive for these kinds of questions. ISBC hartsutzes.
Shouldn't it be hartzvatzes at the end, an S instead of a vo, or is that something I'm not understanding?
Yeah, I wonder if that's a typo there, and I'm struggling to read it. Hartz. I think it's a hearts. It's missing a.
It's missing a hewn there, I think.
That's what it's missing. It's missing
Hartsvadzo, so it makes it
Hartsvadzo.
genitive.
Hartsvadzo.
Or
That's why I
like
was-
dative in this case.
Mhm.
Sorry.
I think to you as just I was sort of struggling there, and I was thinking I should have just probably read the print because I typed out and missed a letter here and there. And but yes, so be ready or attentive for these kinds of questions, and I put them all in plural. And I wonder if that's how you would see it as well, because bataskhank is plural, which is responses or to give a response. And to respond, I mean, and I think here to truthfully, I wonder if that adjectival sort of works there. What do you, and I'd be curious what all you come up with.
Yeah, I would say teach truthfully, because to teach in truth, at least in English, kind of becomes a different thing, I think.
Yeah.
That's with truth. Instrumental is with truth. So truthfully,
Yeah.
you can turn it to the adverb.
Yeah.
So truthfully is, I'd say, fine.
Yeah. So I kind of left the various options. Yeah, that's. And then another one here in terms of arabelution. I wonder what do you think? How would you translate that to communicate essentially that exceedingly advantage or surpassing advantage? What sort of adjectives would you think of there?
Well, you mean the noun of arabelution? What?
Yes, so
Yeah.
describing the yes, so the surpassingness is what I mean. It doesn't sound very nice, I think, but I'm trying to think of the whether you would think, how would you translate arabelution?
Yeah, advantage, benefit.
Advantaged or yeah, I like benefit. Okay, it's an sort of an advantaged hope that we are standing firmly and visibly. What would be? I'm sorry, you're right. It's and the other sort of alternatives I came up with was the idea of learning versus gaining later on. Any comments or alternatives there? Shahelk, Ibanitsen, Zerots.
What does dira best there mean? Is that the in confidence?
Yes, I was hoping someone would ask that.
Yeah.
So what does dira best mean? So how would you break those into?
Like a der and best. I mean.
Okay, good. That's definitely how you would break it down. But what does it mean to sort of be in a lordly way?
To master the material, kind of.
Okay, and
at least you'd say that in English. Mastery.
Yes, mastery. Which then, would you say then by extension that would produce confidence?
Yeah. Sure.
So I was going back and forth on that as to talking something to translate it, whether it would be mastery but I sort of went into interpreting more. But I think apes is, yeah, it's a rich word to sort of unfold, and I think that's very well done.
Or even if I may add, Ani, saying confidently.
Very nice.
But in Shahyalk, though, is, I mean, like winnings or something. I mean, is that
gains, right?
Gains,
so,
yeah.
Yeah.
But the dira best goes with the ganastsen.
Right. Yeah, no, I understand. That's right. And is that supposed to be Mastutunis? In other words, the third line from the bottom.
Yes. And is that also spelled incorrectly?
I don't mean to nitpick, but it's, yeah.
No, that's right. No,
Imastutis is what it says now, which
this is part of my trick to see if you actually know your Krapar spellings. No.
Look, I'm no master of Karapar, but I've done the Badarak and the Jamakirk enough to know that there's no Imastutis.
There is definitely not Imastutis. It's the when I opened the abbreviations, I didn't put in all the
I understand.
Vowels as I should have.
Yeah.
Well, I think this is, you guys are wonderful Karapar students. You're teaching me a lot. I hope that it's useful to see a commentary from the 12th century on it. I'm happy to send the slides, especially of the printed versions, which do have the abbreviations. If you would like to visit them and sort of study it, I'm happy to do that. But with this, I'd like to close to just be respectful of time. I know it's already 4 minutes past. And I will hand it over to Eric if that's okay.
Yeah. Thank you, Ani, for this exhilarating conversation. It just sounds like everyone was very engaged, which is very good. I'm going to leave it here because I think a lot of the Q&A, as Ani was presenting, was embedded within the conversation. So if you do have any questions for her, You can email us at the diocese at VEMCAR. And again, if you want to register for next session is Wednesday, September 8th. You can do that. And Deacon Ryan Yezras Telelian is with us tonight, and he's going to be presenting on September 8th at 7 o'clock. So
There's-
you can go to the
Do we have to register separately? Aren't we kind of already
I
registered?
think, well, when you go to the website, there's like a separate button for each one. So I'm pretty sure you may have to register for each
Oh,
one.
Okay.
I would do it just in case.
Even I
I
had
s-
to register for
Yeah,
my.
I had to-
I saw that it was on the 1st. Is there a confusion with the date? 'Cause
Let me,
something I saw said it's September 1st.
I had another question came up asking the same thing. So I'm just going to go to the website right now.
That's what I saw on the
Yeah,
website.
that's what I thought. It was September
I'm sorry. I'm
1st.
sorry. It's, you know what I had? It was session 8,
Okay.
Right.
Wednesday,
Okay.
September 1st. That's my fault.
Okay,
I apologize. I had an 8 in there and I thought it was September. So Wednesday, September 1st, next week at 7 will be the last session, number 8.
I would have missed it. Thanks for asking that.
I apologize for that. But thank you, everyone, for attending tonight. And
Thank you.
we'll see you next time.
Thank you,
Ani.
Ani. Thank you, Ani.
Thank you.
Thank you.